The room froze, not because of the king, not because of the speeches, but because of a single crown, a crown once worn by Diana, the people's princess. And the moment Catherine walked in wearing it, the balance inside Buckingham Palace changed forever. The chandeliers sparkled, the cameras snapped, and Buckingham Palace shone in its characteristic show of monarchic flawlessness. It was meant to be another immaculately choreographed state dinner. Slick smiles, classy gowns, and speeches no one would recall. Something, or someone, else stole the show tonight. It wasn't the grub, and it most definitely wasn't King Charles. The whole room was holding its collective breath for one piece of jewelry, a tiara. Not any tiara, the lover's knot, last seen in public years ago. And here is the surprise. It wasn't on Queen Camilla's head. As Princess Catherine entered the grand hall, the mood changed immediately. Her dress was perfect, her hair and makeup impeccable as ever. But none of that created the commotion. What each and every eye was drawn to was the tiara, the same one that had been worn by Diana, the people's princess. It wasn't merely glistening diamonds and pearls. It was a quiet, unspoken declaration. Camilla had arrived just moments earlier, her own royal jewels sparkling around her neck, her measured smile perfectly camera ready, but as she saw Catherine, her eyes widened in surprise. Just for a moment long enough to be snapped by cameras, long enough to prompt knowing looks between insiders. Rumors started circulating in the room. Since the lover's knot is not something you whip out of a jewelry box. Commissioned in 1914 for Queen Mary, handed down through the years, it became legendary in Diana's hands. She wore it through times of glamour and times of sorrow, and it became part of who she was. Now here it was once again, no longer imprisoned in the vault, but shining and alive perched upon Catherine's head. Camilla maintained her dignity, but slowed her pace and stiffened her stance. She was aware of what she was observing. According to royal custom following Queen Elizabeth's death, Camilla had precedence of choice over the collection. She might have chosen the lover's knot, but somehow, either by the late Queen's personal choice or tacit family understanding, it had been allocated to Catherine instead. And in that instant, Catherine wasn't only wearing a tiara. She was wearing a legacy. Diana's legacy, one constructed not on titles, but on warmth, imperfections, and humanness, the exact things that made her so loved. Even when the tiara was burdensome, both physically and emotionally, Diana wore it as armor. Now imagine being Camilla, after years of carefully navigating public opinion, never fully embraced despite her efforts, watching Catherine step into that same spotlight effortlessly. From the moment she joined the royal family, Catherine had been adored. And now she stood before the world, literally wearing Diana's crown. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't loud, but it was powerful. The tiara did what no speech or statement possibly could. It caused everyone to remember who still sat at the helm in the hearts of the people. And in that quiet juxtaposition, Catherine didn't even have to say a word. The crown did her speaking for her. Camilla had struggled for years to establish herself as worthy to stand by the king's side. By all the old standards, she'd succeeded: queen consort, host of lavish state affairs, wearer of the most sought after jewels in the vault, and yet nothing was able to protect her from the stomach punch of seeing Catherine wear that tiara, because the lover's knot was never simply diamonds and pearls. It bore a weight infinitely greater than its gold setting, a weight constructed of history, of memory, and the perpetual shadow of Diana. This was no impartial decoration. It had a ghost, and that night Camilla could sense this ghost wandering in the room. Each look towards Catherine was an implicit respect for a woman who had never really departed from the heart of the people. Diana's name was not said, it hung there, in the shine of the pearls, in Catherine's dignified stance, in the way the eyes of people mellowed when they gazed upon her. More mature visitors recalled Diana's dignity and subdued sadness. The younger ones had been raised on documentaries and memorial reels, and now, here it was again. An instant that seemed to fold time in half and present itself in silver and symbolism. Camilla realized the truth at once. All those years she spent braving chill headlines, merciless nicknames, and persistent media vilification. All those years gritting her teeth and plowing on without a murmur. All of it was suddenly far away, because despite how far she'd traveled, The shadow she thought she'd left behind was standing directly in front of her, not receding, but radiating. And the irony was biting. Most thought that when Camilla became queen, she had finally left Diana's shadow behind her, but that evening proved the shadow hadn't gone away. It had merely shifted from memory to symbol, and now rested shining on Catherine's head, within the palace. Others took notice. You couldn't. Tabloid vitriol and palace corridor gossip. She had weathered it all, rising to a title many thought she would never hold. By tradition, by law, by sheer determination, she had won her place. When Catherine wore Diana's tiara, it wasn't about who possessed what, it was about who was what to the people. That night, the truth was impossible to ignore. Camilla had the crown, Catherine had the hearts. For the monarchy, it was a harsh reminder. Tradition is not enough. People yearn for connection. They yearn for someone they can trust, someone they can believe in. And Catherine had been establishing that trust for years, steadily, unobtrusively, without drama. She didn't pursue the limelight. She didn't impose herself. She just arrived with humility and unobtrusive strength, until the public started perceiving her as their own. So when she finally wore the lover's knot, it didn't simply look right. It felt right. Not by dictate, by second nature. Camilla went on with her part with grace. She still donned the large jewels, still attended the important gatherings. But something had changed. The spotlight no longer trailed her quite the same. Not because she didn't try hard enough, but because legacy isn't something you physically hold on to. It is something you embody. And in that implicit manner, the tiara had selected Catherine, not just because she was married into the family, but because she possessed the sort of elegance people wish to emulate. Diana had done the same. And now, by the very same crown, the story didn't end. It kept going. Not supplanted, not rewritten, but carried forward. The monarchy lives and breathes on symbols, coats of arms, royal seals, jewels centuries old, but the ones that really count aren't stored in display cases. They're the ones that move people. And on that night of glitter under the chandeliers, one tiara did just that. It reminded everyone that royalty isn't ever about who is next. Sometimes it is about who the people have faith in, and whether anyone within the palace would ever utter it out loud or not. They all knew where that faith was now. Each look in the direction of Catherine was like a quiet respect to a woman whom the world had never really released. Diana's name was not necessary. It was in the gentle shine of the pearls, in the slender dignity of Catherine's stance, and in the flash of feeling in the eyes of those present. Older visitors remembered Diana's composure and soft sorrow. Younger ones saw her through documentaries, interviews, and endless tribute montages. And now, it seemed the years were folded back upon themselves, an instant suspended in silver and symbolism. Camilla felt it all at once. The years of smiles past frozen headlines, of long-suffering efforts to redefine herself in the public eye, all suddenly seemed distant. No matter how much she had traveled, she was still running after a ghost that would not be banished. And tonight, the ghost wasn't hiding in the shadows. It glowed. The irony stung. After years of brutal nicknames, unrelenting media attention, and public coldness, Camilla had endured. She had remained quiet, held on, and finally achieved the title of queen. Everybody thought that was the point at which she had finally moved out of Diana's shadow. But the reality was otherwise. The shadow had merely been relocated. It had transitioned from memory to symbol, and now it rested shining on Catherine's head. Within the palace walls, individuals saw. It is impossible to simulate the sort of responses that permeated that room. Interactions with Catherine were just a little more wary. Glares hung a fraction of a second longer. Even the most experienced staff, schooled to hide their feelings, seemed to be venturing onto uncharted terrain. The dynamic in the room had shifted, not by rank, but by presence. Camilla's smile remained in place, but it was a little tighter than normal. Her eyes lacked their usual sparkle. She still sported her own crown, the girls of Great Britain and Ireland tiara, which had once been worn by Queen Elizabeth herself. It was a potent symbol of solidity and power, but at that moment it lacked the same impact. Because legacy isn't about the jewels in your hair, it is about the feeling you give when others see you. And Catherine didn't seek to steal the spotlight. She didn't have to. The tiara spoke on its own. It reminded others of a chapter they still loved, and in wearing it, Catherine felt less like an outsider to the throne, and more like the natural extension of something deep. Camilla was standing in the same room, with the same title, but the atmosphere was different. And for one who had waited for so many decades to feel as though she belonged, the distance between where she was and where Catherine was had never seemed farther. And then there were the photographs, Zone picture in particular. Catherine smiling softly under the lover's knot, set the internet ablaze within minutes. Headlines soon followed, some considered, others blunt. Diana's spirit returns. Catherine channels the people's princess. A crown reclaimed. No matter how carefully the palace attempted to manage the news, the people had spoken, and they had not merely admired, they had felt deeply emotionally. It was nostalgia mixed with hope, to see tiara in the open like that, not back in a case, nor locked in a painting, but being worn by a person walking elegantly into the future, moved something common and deep. It reminded everyone of a moment when the royal family had been more human, more exposed, more relatable. Catherine hadn't requested the comparison, but she didn't have to. The tiara had put it there for her, with or without her consent. Behind palace walls, the waves resonated. Advisors and insiders could see that. A subtle shift in power had just been done, not in official position, but in something much more difficult to acquire, the people's hearts. The change wasn't in rank. The names didn't change. The change was in power, in perception, in the silent language of symbols in the monarchy. The lover's knot had spoken, and its meaning had stuck. Camilla, as unfazed as ever, sensed the vibration. This wasn't new to her, feeling like the other. Her early days as a member of the royal sphere had been filled with scrutiny, sidelong glances, and whispered questioning. She had weathered all of it, survived her detractors, and ascended to the place many once believed she would never reach. By law, by tradition, and for some, even by feeling she had won her right. But the difference between duty and devotion becomes excruciatingly clear when the jewels emerge. When Catherine wore Diana's tiara, it was never a question of possession, but of significance. That evening, the contrast was stark. Camilla wore the crown, Catherine wore the hearts. For the royal family, it was a sobering reminder that tradition alone cannot secure the future. People crave connection. They want someone they trust, someone they believe in. And Catherine had been quietly earning that trust for years, not with grand gestures, not with dramatic statements, but simply by showing up consistently, with humility, with steadiness, with grace. So when she did wear the lover's knot finally, it didn't seem like a breach of tradition. It seemed inevitable, not out of protocol, but because it was right. Camilla still went to events, still dressed in her own dazzling jewels, still carried out her role, but something had changed. The light no longer followed her in the same way, not because she didn't try, but because legacy isn't something you possess, it is something you embody. And in that sense, the tiara had been picked by Catherine, not merely because she wedded into the family, but because she possessed the same understated, captivating poise that had long made Diana unforgettable. The narrative hadn't been usurped, it hadn't been reimagined, it had carried on through the very same crown. The monarchy is based on symbols, coats of arms, royal signatures, heirlooms that have been passed down through the years. But the most important aren't the ones secured in display cases. They're the ones that touch hearts. And on that evening, under the chandeliers and highly polished silver, one tiara did just that. It was a reminder to everyone that royal business isn't always about who comes next in line. Sometimes it is about who the people believe, and whether or not anyone within the palace would have the guts to say it out loud. Everyone knew precisely where that belief sat now.